Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics with a project today, actually a free pattern from Robert Kaufman. This is called Mini Petals, and they have created the batik collection, artisan batik collection, Kasuri. The coupling of that design with this beautiful blue batik collection was so pretty that you're seeing the quilt here. They have allowed us to share this pattern with you. It's beautiful in, of course, the Kasuri, but I can imagine this in a lot of other collections as well. I want to show you how easy this is. If you're a beginner, you can absolutely do this. And I love that as experienced quilters, not everything has to be a really difficult project. Sometimes it's nice to have a simpler project. We can relax just a little bit, enjoy the journey of some patchwork, and have a beautiful quilt to display or perhaps give as a gift. So one of the things that we've done, in addition to the mini petals pattern that will be in your Kasuri kit, is right away inside their pattern, they talk about using a layer cake pre-cut 10-inch squares. That will be in your kit. That's what's right here. But because some of the fabrics, as we kind of fan through there, are very similar, one of the things they're recommending in their pattern is to label that pattern. They mention it right away, or label the fabrics, I should say. And if we kind of dive into the pattern, kind of almost toward the back of the pattern, they have this numbering system, because you can imagine these fabrics right here need to be the same fabrics. It's like this blossoms out, right? And all of these fabrics need to be in that exact position. So this is why they're very specific about each of those fabrics being in those locations and giving them almost a letter identifier. To make your life a lot simpler, and this is something extra we're doing, in your kit you're getting a full sheet of stickers and a half sheet of those stickers. Those are syncing up with the position and the exact fabrics that are in this pattern, so that you don't have to go buy a bunch of stickers. We've already done that for you, and you can now just apply them. So as we kind of dive into the project, one thing we discovered is you're going to take your pre-cut here and you're going to actually cut this into 4 5-inch squares. We found it was easier to put those stickers on right in advance, right into the middle of that. So once you cut out your 5-inch squares, it's already labeled for you. You're not kind of doing that afterward. So that was just something we thought was very helpful. One thing we discovered about pre-cuts, and of course these are stated to be 10-inch squares, but notice they have that pinked edge on there. And there's always been a debate. Is the pink edge part of the 10-inch measurement or not part of the 10-inch measurement? Here's what you need to know. Whatever that is that you're trying to cut out of a pre-cut, if you're going to be sub-cutting a pre-cut, as we are, you want to first understand what the size of that pre-cut actually is to determine, okay, if I know I need 4 5-inch squares out of my larger 10-inch square, am I just cutting this exactly vertically and exactly horizontally, and those will automatically be perfectly 5? Or is this slightly bigger than 10 and I might need to cut that down just a touch? So that's the first thing that I would encourage you to do with any pre-cut. Maybe you're going to pick up the pattern and use your own fabrics from home or a pre-cut from home. That's great. But if you are going to be using the Kasuri of fabrics, you're picking up the kit. The first thing that I did is I laid my ruler on, and it's easier to almost see it if I only have one fabric here. I've labeled a bunch of them in advance. But as I lay my ruler on at the very top and I look at the bottom, these fabrics are measuring just a little over 10, around 10 1/16, not quite 10 1/8. What that tells me is, while I could absolutely cut this exactly vertically and exactly horizontally, I think my better approach, because I want this to be dead on at 5, is potentially trimming just a touch off the side, or I think my favorite approach is using the perfect 5. This is a Creative Grid ruler here, and I'm tucking this right in this corner. Now you need to make sure that you're not infringing on the other 5-inch square that's down here in this corner. So that's why you might want to go on the back side of that fabric. It's a batik, so there really isn't a right side and wrong side. And maybe just draw a quick line and say, all right, if I place my ruler just inside that pinked edge, and I were to make a cut, I'm going to draw this in here, and we're going to just check it. And I was to make a cut, am I infringing on the square down here or over here? And as we place our ruler here, we can say that we're doing pretty well. There's not a lot of breathing room. Another approach that you could take is to say, you know, I'm going to stack a few of these exactly. I've stickered all my fabric, and maybe you want to cut 2 or 3 fabrics at a time. If you do that, you need to make sure you are exactly stacked one on top of the other and there's no shifting. If that makes you nervous, cut one at a time. And by all means, right, we can cut knowing that this is our 5 and including that edge, the pinked edge, we can cut that 5. In fact, let's just do one of these together. I want to show you these options. Sometimes when I approach a pre-cut, I'm like, I've got a couple different approaches. What's the approach I want to take with this? Especially if I know the pre-cut is slightly larger and now I need to almost trim it down a little bit. If we want to take this approach, I know that's 5. I'm going to spin my mat around, and from this side, I'm going to measure over 5 again. Notice what's in the middle right now. Just a little bit of fabric, right? This pre-cut was just a little bit bigger. But I do know that this is 5. But here we go again. If we want to say, all right, I'm more comfortable measuring from that furthest edge and understanding that that small pinked edge is part of my 5. Cut from this side. Now that is 5 inches square. Rotate the mat, cut from this side. And again, we should have a little piece of fabric in the middle. And then you have 2 5-inch squares. So whether you take that approach or you grab that perfect 5 and you're almost tucking that up into those corners, cutting around that, just make sure you're not infringing on the square below or the square next to it. However you want to get your 5-inch squares, you just need to get 4 of those out of each of the layer cakes that the pattern is indicating that you're going to use in that. And any extra, if there are any extra layer cake squares, just put those aside for your stash. The next thing the pattern is calling for is a lot of 2.5-inch squares, lots of those. That's how we're going to snowball. It's called snowballing the corners. This is where I love to grab that 2.5-inch by width of fabric and just start cutting strips of that, cutting several strips of that. And then you can turn that to the side and subcut those into 2.5-inch units, either with a smaller ruler, or if you want to get very granular and you've got all of your background fabric, which is this beautiful light batik, and you simply want to have the 2-inch square and cut around a bunch of that, you can do that too. Again, however you want to get all of your 2.5-inch squares, you will go ahead and cut plenty of those per the instructions in the pattern. Once you have that, and let me just bring out one of our blocks so it's a little easier for you to see here. Basically, we are drawing a line from corner to corner, placing that in opposite corners, and we're going to sew on the line, trim, and that's it. That is how you make the block on this quilt all throughout this quilt. Now I'm going to do this one here with the drawn line, and down here I'm going to show you another tool that I really like. I want to expose you to that, and you can decide if that's something you think you might want to add to your sewing room or not. But I always love to give you options of things that have come out on the market that are supposed to help our life be a little bit easier and make our blocks more accurate. So I'm going to sew directly on this line. I've got an Aurifil, kind of a softer white. You could use a gray, whatever you're thinking of for that. For the pressing on this, the instructions in the pattern, by the way, this is the gorgeous backing. If you're going to get this quilt, This is the Kasuri fabric backing. It's a stunning chopped batik. Just pick that up at the same time. Limited quantities as always. These batiks, it's amazing. Do you know that they make batiks and they dry them outside on a beach? They're all made in, I believe, Indonesia. Hopefully I got that right. I think it's just amazing. They're made by hands. It's phenomenal. Once you have this, the pattern just says press. Well, you've got a couple choices. You can press to the outside, or what we discovered here is, especially knowing that these blocks are going to be coming together like this, right? This is how they're going to be coming together. We pressed ours actually open to help the block lay a little bit flatter as all of this strip piecing, or not strip piece, but block assembly starts happening. So my instinct was initially to press to the outside. I've always done that. But in this instance, pressing that seam open helped the seam to keep our block laying a little bit flatter. Now I'm happy with what I'm seeing in the corner. I'm going to trim that away. And then I'm just going to repress that seam actually open. And that's one corner. And of course you could take the same approach and do the opposite corner. You're always just going to do 2 of those corners. Right? So we've got this. The next one, again, you would get your fabric, grab a straight edge, draw the line. That's in the opposite corner. So confirm you're happy with what you're seeing, press that seam open, or if you want to press the outside, however you want to press. I said I wanted to expose you to a different product, and that's the corner clipper. What the corner clipper does is 2 things. You can avoid drawing the line, and you don't have to trim after. All of that's kind of done up front. We know that right now our choices are to put a fabric on, draw the line, or if I have that batik fabric, I bring this in the corner. The corner clipper. What is this business about the corner clipper? Creative grid tool. Lay this down on top of your fabric. Make sure your square is stacked exactly on top of your background fabric. Remember how we said we were cutting 2.5-inch squares? Notice this is saying 2.5, and look at this line. See, this is, imagine you having drawn that line, sewn on that line, and this is your trim line. What the corner clipper does for you, let me get this all perfectly lined up, and the sticker is kind of actually interfering with my sight picture. I'm going to move that sticker here. By positioning my ruler right, the fabric's on top of the background, the ruler straight on top, basically, if you know and you remember, this is the side that's going to be cut away. Well, the corner clipper allows you to skip the step of tracing, trim it now. We're going to sew. And now let's see how we have our beautiful corner. I'm going to open that up, open that seam like we've been doing. So it's another way to get to the same goal. And if I showed you this quilt block, you don't know which of those I did. One way, drawing the line, the other one's using the corner clipper. If you'd like to skip that whole step of drawing the line and trimming later as 2 separate steps, consider the corner clipper. It's a great option, especially if you'd like to snowball those blocks. Once you've made your blocks, and I'll grab 2 of them that I've already done, now it's just a matter of looking at your layout and making sure everything's laid out the way you want it to be. And that's what those letters really help, because you can imagine without this lettering, some of these fabrics are very blendy. Batiks are like that. That's the nature. That's why we're drawn to them. We have a very light section here and a dark section here. So keep those stickers on. get everything laid out, and they're having you assemble these in those rows, right? So if I just have 2 blocks here, which I have the letter C, let me just show you one thing I want to point out here. And this is kind of right in the middle of this. I would obviously lay all this out either on a design wall, the floor, wherever, make sure I've got all of my rows where they should be before I start sewing anything together. I've done that far too many times. But lay these out, place them right side together, and of course, as we see, the most important place to pin first is that intersection right there. So you're not just going to pin left or right, you're checking that position and you're saying, this is what matters to me most. Pinning here first, pinning in the corners here. Put that out of here. In fact, let me go sew that. Let me do that, and I want to press that seam open with you so you can see how nice those points come out when you pin there first. And this is, of course, we're going to press our seam open to distribute that bulk evenly. And we have a beautiful point where everything came together. And now you've got that portion and you're continuing onward, right? So when you lay your rows out, if you are new to quilting, if you're experienced, you already know what I'm probably going to say here, but if you're a newer quilter, once you get all of your rows laid out and you're like, yep, everything's perfect, and you sew K and U together, you're not just going to add T to that. Let me bring the pattern a little bit closer to me here. You're not just going to add T onto that and S onto that. So K and U, that's a unit. T and S, that's a unit. And these two, and these two, and these two. Then, with this piece unit and this piece unit, sew those together. Doing this in these sections helps reduce almost this bowing that happens. I've lived that. I've seen that has this nice, slight rainbow effect, and I don't know why that is, but it's a thing. So by laying out those rows and doing groups of 2 and then groups of 4, really helps reduce that bowing. And then of course you're sewing all the rows together, top to bottom. Again, your first whole row and second whole row together, rows 3 and 4 together, and that same process. And then obviously final assembly, inner border, outer border, and then you have an amazing quilt. This is just a beautiful design. Thank you to Robert Kaufman for letting us show you really how easy it is to make the mini petal block. It's just one block. And the stickers will hopefully help you stay organized, have everything lay out perfectly, and you'll have a beautiful quilt. Be sure to pick up your kits, limited as always, the gorgeous backing. Any notions you might need, subscribe, and I'll see you soon on another video at Shabby Fabrics.